the world is changing very, very, very quickly, to get up in the morning and be excited. Less about being a technician and more about having an adaptable mind and an open mindset. Not taking risks is a massive risk.
Rob, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you.
Rob, law degree in McGill, consultant at Oliver Wyman, a decade in Aldo. Sound like you had the perfect career. And then you just started your own business. Why did you leave the corporate world and decide to start your company?
It's a good question, and I think, if I look back, I have a pretty eclectic mosaic of experience. It's not the ride for everybody, to be honest with you, because reinventing and I'm still reinventing, just so you know, I'm in constant reinvention mode. To be honest with you, as I thought back on it, it seemed to me that what I've been trying to do all along, and now with the having the sort of benefit of hindsight, is that I've been trying to create my own perfect job, essentially, and it never really existed in any of the constructs that I was involved with. So I had very positive experiences in all of these different areas, and they all taught me a lot. But I fundamentally knew that it wasn't enough for me personally. So to get up in the morning and be excited, I had to sort of craft the type of work that I wanted to do. And I felt that after graduating from each of those different stages that you referred to, I was in a place where I could maybe apply all of that in a way that's somewhat differentiated in an area that I really enjoy, which is sort of branding, brand strategy, and generally speaking, visioning. So where the world is going and where brands and organizations can kind of position themselves for the future. And so I rely on all of those experiences, insights that I made over the years, relationships as well, to help form a certain way of looking at the world and things and organizations and politics and geopolitics and economics and creativity and artistry and the rest of it, and sort of put that into the service of organizations that are trying to move to the next level. And so that's been sort of my framework, and even the way that I've organized my own business. It's sort of non-traditional. My inputs are non-traditional. I do things the way that I feel inspire me, and then inspire the people that work with me on different projects.
It sounds like when you're talking about branding, you go beyond the aesthetics, beyond the words. You're taking a lot of things into consideration. I mean, the terminology, non-traditional. Can you talk to us a bit about your approach? What do you do exactly in the company?
Yeah, so I mean, there's non-traditional that sort of comes to life in different ways. So I'll give you a couple of internal ways that it's non-traditional. So first of all, the people that I work with or join me on this journey are generally not from any sort of marketing background, and neither am I. Essentially, I mean, I did work in marketing. I never studied it. I never worked for a big agency or anything like that. So I love hiring people that have degrees in comparative religious studies, who have understand how to unpack ideology, because then you have to apply that kind of thinking, that construct, to marketing and to brands and to that universe of customers, et cetera. So I'm always hiring people who are a little bit different, have the ability to do multiple things, like athletes as opposed to position players, who can be very dexterous in terms of their thinking, very open-minded and very critical about things, and less position players. That's kind of one way. My inputs also are very different. You'll probably never see me at a marketing conference. I'll speak at some of them, but I don't really attend them very much. But I find my inputs through travel. If you can see behind me in my office, I mean, it's just sort of littered with architecture and art books, not so much marketing texts or things like that. So really finding a purity of inspiration around things, and then also being extremely curious about what's happening in the world completely outside of the industry that I work in. And then just within the industry that I work in, it's really not about getting too siloed into one place. So we'll do a lot of work with beauty brands or luxury brands or fashion brands or hospitality or travel, but then we'll work with the UN or other NGOs with countries on their branding, et cetera. And so we have sort of like a wide spectrum of inputs that help inform the next industry that we're involved with. So I believe a lot in uh, sort of plotting dots for yourself and then being able to connect them. I think that's a really powerful perspective and a way to look at things, and gives you sort of an original perspective on something. If you've done beauty brands your whole life, listen, a lot of clients would like you to have done 100 beauty brands. That's all you do. You're expert in that. So that intuitively for them, It's like, if you've done that, you can do this. I think of it very differently. I think of it as the world is changing very, very, very quickly. And if you're not kind of up on sort of how things are changing at a macro level, at an industry level, at a consumer human level, then I think that the output that you're going to develop is sort of less culturally relevant, and will be less engaging, and will help. We'll give the organizations a harder time tracking as to where they need to go. So that's one way of thinking about non-traditional. The other way of thinking about non-traditional, we'll get to the art stuff, the artistry and the creative and the communications elements, or all of these things. That's sort of like the easy part. The hard part is figuring out what's going on in the world. And I think today it's, I think everyone's feeling that way. So I'll start with elements like the poly crisis and what's going on in the world, and how that poly crisis, which is sort of one crisis feeding the next crisis and all happening sort of in hyperdrive right now, um, it's like, I'm looking at how that's impacting not just industries, but psychologies of people, the psyche of people right now. So if you look at where the world is today, the premise that we'll start with is that people feel very, very dislocated, no matter what end of the political spectrum you're on, in the US, globally, et cetera, with technology, with the environmental disasters that are happening at our feet more and more, even in North America. It's just like, we're trying to understand sort of the psychology of people, where they're at, and then we're trying to meet them where they're at. Industries are also changing rapidly. So we're looking also at things like Web3 and things like AI over the years, and trying to get ahead of those elements just to see how those constructs are changing. And even right now, we're looking at, what will an organization look like in 5 years? It's going to look probably very, very different. And so just skilling up on all of the technology that's sort of coming to play, and making sure that we're sort of well prepared to guide these brands into the future. At the end of the day, I think what we're trying to do is help navigate, help organizations navigate. And so I think if you're caught up in doing the same types of campaigns, or the same types of marketing approaches, strategies, output, the rest of it, collaborations, the rest of it, and you're not keen on where the world is going, the psychology of customers are going, then you're not able to position a brand for the future. You're able to position them maybe for today, but today's changing so quickly that I'm not sure of the value of what it, of being, perfectly relevant in this moment, as opposed to being perfectly relevant in this moment, but then also understanding where that puck is going to move, to use sort of a Canadian analogy or metaphor, where that puck is going to move very, very quickly.
You feel like the brands you work with have a bigger risk appetite because you're not the typical marketing person.
Mm.
And typically people want to stay away from the politics and everything that's going on. They just want the brand to be neutral. Like, just buy my shoes. We don't care about anything. But you're actually embracing what's going on. And so I'm curious about the type of people. Why do they hire you specifically? Is it because you're outside of this tunnel vision?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a smaller field for us to play in because of that. I think brands, generally speaking, and I mean, I think this is just an honest observation, are quite risk averse. I think that the executives, particularly over the last 20 years, that people in decision-making power have done things a certain way, and it's probably worked pretty well a certain way, and no one really wants to risk upsetting that. I think today that not taking risks is a massive risk. And I'm not suggesting wading into the political waters of that's so tribal right now and so polarizing right now, just to do it or to have an opinion. But what the brands seem to not get so much is that you can wade into those waters where you have permission, and where your communities are interested in you having that perspective. So it's really a really thorough understanding of self as it relates to the brand, what's authentic to the brand. If you come up with a statement that's, or a position that's completely antithetical to what you're all about, or you've been about for 50 years, then it's not going to resonate well. Either it's going to feel inauthentic, or it's going to offend a lot of people. But if you're doing things which are really authentic to who you are, and there's examples of that, Nike, backs Colin Kaepernick, and then Bud Light does something that's just antithetical to their brand ethos, whether it was a good idea or not a good idea. That's another discussion. Whether the brand should be doing progressive things or not, that's another discussion. The question is, how does it relate to your community, your brand, the foundations of what you're all about? So, just to answer your question, I think, yeah, I mean, I think the people who hire us and know me personally, and know that I'm going to take very, very good care as a custodian of their brand, but I'm going to push them outside of their comfort zone for sure. And there's there's groups that don't like to be pushed out of their comfort zone. And by the way, brands get pushed out of their comfort zone. They always regress back to something that feels a little bit more comfortable. We try to push out there, not in a way that's gratuitous, but in a way that we feel is good for the brand based on the data, based on where we see things going, based on where the world is moving, based on where their customers are going, based on where the competitive set, how they're evolving and the rest of it. So a lot of it is based on very thorough strategic foundations, but then we layer on that sort of an energy to help push people and propel people into new places where they can grow or they can resonate in a more authentic way with their communities or new geographies or get into new businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But there is an element of risk taking in all of that. And a large part of the communities that we work within don't like to go into those places, but some of them do. And the ones that do, we get along really well with. And we find that our relationships extend over the years. It's not uncommon for us to be working with them for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. And we're not doing like agency of record stuff. We're just doing their media buy stuff. We're talking about thinking, over 8, 9 years on different projects, et cetera.
How much time do you spend thinking about these new technologies, AI, Web3, the metaverse? How integrated is it in your business process today?
It's sort of integrated into, well, okay, it's integrated into the business process in that we'll start deliberately doing internal workshops on these things, before they kind of blown up. We see it coming down the pipe, and we're like, okay, let's get ahead of this a little bit and let's figure out who's going to take responsibility for this part of it, that part of it, and sort of report to each other on what's going on. So we keep up to date on that. On a personal level, it's every day. It's every day. Yesterday, I was listening to another podcast a podcast about AI and video as an example. And then, tomorrow or today, it'll be another one. Every day we'll be looking at something new. And so just, my big thinking, actually not big thinking, but where my head is going right now is after we sort of been through a lot of sort of the applications of AI as we understand them today is more, I'm trying to figure out what this world is going to look like in 3 years, like literally what it's going to look like. And so that to me is interesting. And so I spend time on that, researching that, automating research for myself on that, talking to people, interviewing people, connecting with people in Silicon Valley who I respect, or in New York or in London or wherever they're at. And just trying to get ahead of where it's going so I can sort of piece it together and see it. But that comes from a very natural place. It's sort of less a business process per se, versus something which is like oxygen for me.
I'm glad you mentioned looking ahead. And I'm going to read this very quickly. Building resilient, culturally relevant, and dynamic brands. The world is changing quickly, not just in terms of AI. The old guard are retiring.
Yeah.
The new generation is getting older now. They're taking over those positions. So how do you keep up with those demographic changes?
You study them. I think it's important. It's interesting that so many of our clients, for example, generationally have been interested in Gen Z, for example. So if we've rewinded like 5, 10 years, everyone was like, how do we deal with China as a market, right? That was like a big thing. Gen Z recently is, the last number of years obviously has been on everyone's radar. And I think the way you get to that is by, I think, applying a critical lens as to what we're actually seeing. And so I'll give you an example. I was working with a very large luxury fashion brand in the last year or so, and Gen Z was obviously on the agenda, and we were sort of working through all the different generations and how a brand can be relevant to both Gen Z and Gen X at the same time, and it's being stretched. And it was just interesting to see the perspectives of the executives on and not just for this particular brand, by the way, but most of them. Executives are older. The people in decision-making power are older. They're not necessarily Gen Z yet, although there are exceptions. And the perception is not necessarily reality. And so the perception is it's an abbreviated culture. It's highly digital. They're not very social. There's a lot of these sort of themes that come out. But when you kind of dig into it, you kind of see that, well, some of that may be true. I mean, they do speak in emojis and in very quick digital quips and the rest of it. But there is sort of a movement towards things which are more tactile right now. There's a strong need for to experience something that feels nostalgic, whether it's music or fashion, uh, material things, paper, these types of elements, even reading clubs. got really, really big in the last year or two, and some big brands like Miu Miu jumped on that and developed reading clubs to appeal to Gen Z, which would be so counterintuitive for most brands thinking about Gen Z to be like a reading club. They don't read. It's not true, So sometimes it's about, again, it's about being critical and asking what's really going on. And I think that's where organizations generally across the board kind of fall down, is that we kind of take a very reductive perspective on what's happening without really understanding underneath what's really, really going on. When you understand what's really going on, that this is a generation, for example, that um, is synthetic in the sense that the generation is synthetic, but their cultural focal point is right. So there's no sort of like one center for it, because it all was happening sort of in a digital way. There's a need now, and we're all human beings fundamentally at the end of the day, to sort of connect in a different way, and that's why all these things are becoming very popular. It's not a surprise to us, but seems to be a surprise to a lot of people that we're working with. It's like, really, they're into that? And I've said, yeah, if we just did a little bit of scraping, we could have been first on that, which is a whole other question, because most brands don't want to be first on things, but that's a completely
Mm.
different. Yeah.
Rob, I want to end with this. I'm going to circle back to the AI topic and ask you, do you see the rise of these new software, the ease of use of AI, as a threat to your industry? Or because right now you can build an entire ad in like 2 seconds. You just write a prompt and it gives you something. Do you feel like this is a threat, or is this just leveling up the industry as a whole?
I think it's leveling it up a lot. I mean, I think it's, just the amount of research I can do, on my laptop right now, is unbelievable. It's incredibly powerful. I can get up learning curves really, really quickly. So I don't need, hundreds of people doing research and consolidating all of that, which I find incredibly powerful. So I think for smaller shops, it's game changing in terms of their ability to compete. I think for anything mechanical, I mean, I was a lawyer also. I think, like, if you're a lawyer right now and you're staring down at AI, I mean, you have to really rethink what your job, what your métier is going to be, because it's not going to necessarily be drafting documents. That's not what it's going to be, or even preparing pleadings, because that'll be kind of mostly done for you. Um, I think AI. I think for me, I don't do. I've always stayed away from all of the mechanical stuff as much as I could. I mean, we still do turnkey projects on a case by case basis for groups who really want us to do them. Um, for me, it's just enabling. It's just like, I feel it's very, very exciting, and I feel that it's also, from my perspective, because I think I have an adaptive ethos. I'm okay with it. It's good. I'm going to move with it and see where there's value, how we can leverage it for increased value for our clients, essentially. I think if people, again, are stuck in silos and have done one thing a long time, it's an important time to pull up and see where it's going to go next and try and get into it, even if it feels uncomfortable right now. So I think for the industry, it'll look very, very different. I think the industry has been changing anyways over the last number of years. Um, and I think that this is just an accelerator of that, like, but a massive accelerator of it. I think these organizations are going to look very different in like 3 to 5 years, like very, very fundamentally different. And then that means that there's opportunity to recreate what those organizations look like. These brand strategy groups or management consultancies, if you will look different. Certainly, different numbers of people will be involved. Create on the creative side, the creative tools are sort of not quite there yet. I don't think they can replicate really, really talented creative people right now. But I think it's, what I've seen is just incredible advancements just in the last number of months. So I'm convinced that in a year or so it's going to look dramatically different. And so people have to figure out how they're going to leverage those tools. And I think that fundamentally it's going to be less about being a technician and more about having an adaptable mind and an open mindset, and be able to think critically, because you're going to be, the whole process of going out and acquiring information and synthesizing it is sort of going to be done for you. So the question is, what type of critical filter have you developed so you can best leverage what's being thrown at you?
Rob, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure. Take care, Antoine. Good to see you.